Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called From Betrayal to Breakthrough, Reclaiming Trust, Confidence, and Happiness Through 5 Stages of Healing. My name is Stephen Dinan. I'm the founder and CEO of the Shift Network, and I'm really grateful to be with you here today, getting to learn about one of the most difficult and potentially transformative journeys that any of us go on, which is really metabolizing, working through, and ultimately growing from a really deep breach of trust of some kind. And we're going to be doing that with really one of the world-leading pioneers in this area. Her name is Dr. Debbie Silber. She's a psychologist, a founder and CEO of the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute. She's a best-selling author and multiple TEDx talker who is really laid down a pathway for how can this become a gateway really into our deepest potential. So thank you so much for joining us here today, Debbie.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Great. Well, I want to let everybody know up front, we're going to have a chance to go much deeper with you after this hour in a brand new program. Very excited about this, but we're going to share a little bit more about that towards the end of the hour. So, Debbie, let's start our journey today with your journey. And why have you brought this body of work out, done the deep research? Why is this both a personal and a professional quest for you?
No, I don't think anybody says, oh, I think I want to study betrayal. No, you study betrayal because you have to. It's actually my 30th year in business. It was health and then mindset and then personal development. And as life would morph and change, so would business. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family, thought I did everything I needed to do to heal. And then it happened a few years later. This time it was my husband. Anybody who's been through it, you're shocked, you're blindsided, you're devastated. Life as you've known it is no longer. So I got him out of the house and I looked at the two experiences thinking, okay, well, what's similar to these two? Of course, me, but what else? And realized that boundaries were always getting crossed. I never took my needs seriously. And I'm one of those believers that if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving practice. And I decided to go back for a PhD. And it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing so much. I didn't quite understand it. He was too, wasn't ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing the backstory. So I think what you said there about what happens to us is probably the best place to start. When we do have a deep breach of trust of some kind, what actually happens on multiple levels of our being?
You know, it's such a profound crisis. I mean, every trauma is, but it's the difference in betrayal is the intentionality. It feels so intentional, so we take it so personally. That was actually one of the first discoveries. I was originally studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is, if you can imagine an upside of trauma, how that crisis, that trauma leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective that you didn't have. But I'd been through death of a loved one and I'd been through disease. And I was like, betrayal feels different for me. I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants and I said, if you've been through other crises besides betrayal, is it different for you? Hands down, unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And it's because of how intentional it feels. Like, for example, if you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't necessarily lose trust in everything and everyone. But because we feel a sense of rejection, abandonment, confidence, belonging, worthiness, trust, they're all shattered and they all have to be rebuilt. So it didn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth. It was like, yes, you rebuild your life, but you also have to rebuild yourself. So I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation. That's the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal.
So tell me a little bit about how do you know, what are the symptoms that you have this post-betrayal syndrome or symptoms that really indicate that there has been this deep rupture?
Yeah. That was the second discovery. And what we learned was that there's actually a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. We've had easily over 60,000 people on our site take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz. And what's interesting about it, a few things. The first thing is we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's simply not true, because there's a question that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago and I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 40 years ago. I can feel the hate. My betrayal happened 10 years ago. Feels like it happened yesterday. But every few months I pull the stats from the quiz just to see where people land. And it's not, you'll hear from these stats how staggering betrayal, what it leaves in its wake. So now imagine out of 60,000 plus people, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 82% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. 94% deal with painful triggers, and those triggers can take you down. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. So you wake up, you're exhausted, you slept a whole night, it doesn't matter. That's how you know your adrenals have tanked. 47% have weight changes. So maybe in the beginning you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have digestive issues. And this is anything from Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed. 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% are unable to focus. 64% are in shock. 62% are unable to concentrate. So imagine this. You can't concentrate. You have, let's say, a gut issue. You're exhausted. You still have to work. You still have to raise your kids, take care of your other commitments that you have. That's not even the emotional issues. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are really angry, and really common to bounce back and forth between those two emotions. 82% feel hurt. 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. So this is the one that really got me. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% are preventing themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how. And Stephen, I just want to share this. As staggering as those numbers are, and you didn't hear me read one statistic that said 20%, 30%. What is even crazier is those stats aren't necessarily from a betrayal that happened recently. It could be from something that happened decades ago. So can you imagine here, someone said or did something years ago. They may not even know, care, or even remember. And here we are living in a state of anxiety with a gut issue, exhausted, hypervigilant for something, that happened way back then.
Wow. Those are certainly sobering statistics. And, I imagine they're way higher than like sort of a quote major trauma, like a car accident or something. It's sort of the residue clearly is very multidimensional for a long period of time. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about why do you think that is? Why do some things that we might put in the category of like a bigger physical trauma or a loss, like why do they not have that level of repercussion still downstream 20, 30, 40 years later?
Once you involve the heart, it's a whole other thing. And really the way it works with betrayal, I define it as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule, and every relationship has them. And the way it works, the more you trust and the more you depend on a person, the deeper the betrayal. So for example, a child who's completely dependent on their parent, and that parent does something awful, that's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret. Still a betrayal, different level of cleanup. But what happens is when we have these betrayals, think about it, this was the person or these were the people who gave us a sense of safety and security. So when this is the person, these are the people, to shatter that very sense of safety and security, it's traumatizing. When the person you trust the most proves untrustworthy, who do you trust? When the one you run to when other people are causing harm is the one causing the harm, where do you go? So it's a very different experience.
So it sounds like it's just like there's a very foundational way that our identity gets built around the sense of being able to trust some people in our environment. And then if like that is ruptured, then it's like everything else kind of goes downhill.
Exactly. And here's the thing. There is a very specific way to rebuild trust. And people ask me all the time, can trust be repaired? I say no. Can it be rebuilt? Yes. You know, and I look at trust like a brick wall. And the only way I know of a brick wall to be built is brick by brick by brick. Every opportunity someone has to show that they're trustworthy, that's one brick in that brick wall. And now think about it. Imagine the person who spent all that time building that brick wall. In one earth-shattering moment, the entire wall can come tumbling down. Now, you have every right to look at the rubble of bricks and say, "Now, I don't have the least bit of interest in watching that thing get rebuilt," and that's okay. However, if the one who's been betrayed, the one whose trust has been shattered is willing, that would be their role. And the person who shattered the trust has to be a really good bricklayer. And it goes up the same way it went up the first time, brick by brick by brick. Every opportunity they have to show that they're trustworthy, one brick in that brick wall.
So let's talk about your actual model of or I guess it's more derivative from your research, but the 5 stages of betrayal to breakthrough. Like what are the stages through which we have to progress in order to really transform betrayal into a breakthrough?
Yeah. For me, this was the most exciting out of the 3 discoveries, because what we discovered was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome to that very healed state of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to go through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we even know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages, and we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So healing is entirely predictable. So a stage 1 is like a setup stage. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with all of my study participants, me too, was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and neglecting or not really prioritizing the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, think about it. If a table only has 2 legs, easy for that table to topple over, and that's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, Discovery Day. And this is by far the scariest of all of the stages. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here is you've ignited the stress response. You are now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around the information you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern us, that prevent chaos. And in one earth-shattering moment, all the rules you've ever known to be real and true are no longer. The bottom has truly bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So it's terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of whatever you could to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of these stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? How do I feed my kids? Here's the trap, though. Stage 3, by far, is the one that people land in and stay. And here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive your experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, we're like, okay, all right, this is good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5. Transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is we start getting these small self-benefits from being here. We get to be right. We get our story. We get someone to blame. We get a target for our anger. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to. We don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Can I trust you? Should I trust you? Forget it. I won't trust anybody. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to, but we don't know that. Now, because we're here longer than we should be, now the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Now that we're here longer than we should be, and these are the thoughts we're thinking, like energy attracts like energy. So this is the energy we're putting out. So now we're calling situations and circumstances and relationships towards us to confirm, yep, this is exactly where you belong. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. Right here, we resign ourselves. We're like, this stinks, but I better find a way to be okay with it. So right here is where we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, anything to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves from what's so painful to feel or face. So what happens is we do that for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And Stephen, honestly, I can see someone 20 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, or that drinking you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. They would say, it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. And so, I mean, the essence of stage 3 is really just like we're creating a little bit of a wall of denial or suppression so that we can function, but it doesn't go away, basically, is what you're saying.
That's it. And the longer we stay there, the longer we plant roots there, and the harder it is to leave. So if we're willing to let go of our story and all that goes with it, grieve, mourn the loss, a few things we have to do, we can move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo my experience, but I control what I do with it. And just in that decision, you start turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you'd been creating in stage 2 and stage 3. What's also interesting about stage 4, I always use the example of if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff isn't all there. It's not quite cozy yet, but it's going to be okay. And it's that feeling that you get when you're in stage 4. What's really interesting also is if you were to move, you don't necessarily take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be once you're in that new space. And what I found was if your friends weren't there for you, right here, you've outgrown them. And people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come. Very common as we leave stage 3 and move to stage 4. When we make stage 4 more comfortable mentally, we make it home. We move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and that's healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now we do. The mind is healing. We're making new rules. We're making new boundaries based on the road we just traveled. And we have a new worldview based on what we see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
I'm curious about the new worldview and why that's so central, because you could think that people could heal from, a specific, like one person, maybe they have a sociopath in their life and did something and it was this lying all the time. And then they're like, that doesn't necessarily change their worldview. But why is actually shifting your worldview really central to the deepest level of transformation?
Betrayal really lends itself to creating an entirely new identity. You take all the parts you love and you leave behind what no longer serves. And what happens is, and just to sort of close the loop here also, rebuilding is always a choice, whether you rebuild yourself and move on. And that's what I did with my family. It simply wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely new from the ground up new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, as 2 completely transformed people, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. Betrayal will show you who someone truly is. It also has the potential to wake them up to who they temporarily became. And that new worldview really shows up because there is a complete and utter death and destruction of the old. And that's what allows for the birth of the new.
Hmm. Well, it sort of bringing up your husband like that. It gave me chills. That was the arc you all went through. But about this, a question that we listed for today is like when it is and isn't in your best interest to attempt to heal through interacting with the person who betrayed you. I think that's got to be at the foreground for a lot of people. Like sometimes it's probably easier in some ways to write them off, but it could also be more damaging to give them to stay in there. So it'd be great to just get your reflection on that. I think you were going to actually guide us through a little bit of a self-reflective process as well.
Yeah, actually, yeah, this is something we call it the window of willingness, and it's based on a communication model. And the way it works is, if you can imagine a window the widest open, representing where you have the best potential to heal and rebuild. Again, if you choose, you don't have to, but if you choose to, where the window is absolutely sealed shut, it is not in your best interest. You know, where here you just rebuild yourself and move along. So here the potential is to heal and rebuild with that person. Here, rebuild and move along, and you will see it so clearly. And I just want to say ahead of time, I know some of you will just about through this exercise realize, oh my gosh, I have been banging my head against the wall, trying to rebuild with someone, and I will show you what it looks like here. And you're going to understand why you've been so frustrated and why it hasn't worked and why you have a lot of physical, mental, and emotional symptoms. So we call it the window of willingness. And as I'm going through this, picture the most important person to you, or picture the person who's betrayed you or where trust has been shattered, and you'll see what level they're at. Okay. So where the level is, the window is the widest open, greatest potential to heal and rebuild. Again, if you choose. This is level one, where the window is widest open, and it's where there is remorse, apology, regret, restitution. It sounds something like this. I am so terribly sorry for the pain I caused you. I can't imagine how painful that is. What in the world can I do to make it up to you? Now, again, with betrayal, it's going to take a lot more than that, but you're off to a good start. This person is owning it. They're taking full and complete responsibility, right? Best case scenario right here. Feel the window close a bit as we get to level two. You know it's coming when you hear the word because. I did it because, I said it because, you may still be willing to listen, but it doesn't sound as good as that complete and full ownership. So you could feel that window close a little bit. Again, up to you if you want to work with that, but you can feel it, the window closing a bit. You're at a level 3, and you know it's coming when you hear the word you. Well, I did it because you. I said it because you. I call this the two-sided slap. Here, you trust has been shattered. You get betrayed. That's the slap on one side. And then you get blamed for it. That's the slap on the other. This is, gaslighting, narcissism 101. Don't buy this for a minute. Very little to work with here. Level 3 is very close cousins with level 4. And that's the window is sealed shut. They are not taking any responsibility for their actions. And it can sound something like this. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. You really need help. And what's so frustrating is, and I know so many of you watching this are now realizing, oh my gosh, I have been trying to convince a level 3 and a level 4. Here's where you feel like you want to walk around with a pad and pen and write down your notes and prove and show it to them. And at this level, at this point in time, at their current level of consciousness, you're not working with much. They're not owning it. They're not taking responsibility. In fact, they're blaming you. With level 1 and level 2, you have something to work with. With level 3 and level 4, you heal, you rebuild. And at this point in time, you're best off moving along. And it's something where if you take the time now and assess who are the people in my life, and you're blessed if they're mostly at that level 1 and level 2. If you're working with that level 3, level 4, I can only imagine, and I know that was my family experience. I know how exhausted you are. I know how confused you may be. I know how complicated it feels, but you can heal from all of it.
So it sounds like there may be also a challenge for people who are on a spiritual path and on a growth path, because there's almost like a level of should, like, oh, I should be able to kind of like open again to this person, or even if they're operating from the level 3 or 4. Do you find that fairly common, that people kind of like have some sense of like transformational obligation that feeds into this?
You know, the shoulds always get us in trouble. And it's interesting you mentioned those of us on a spiritual path. Spirituality had a huge place in the transformation process, in a very particular spot too, along the 5 stages. And I saw people in the study who abandoned their religion. They felt their religion wasn't supporting them. They moved to the spiritual side of their religion. They really weren't practicing anything, and they became spiritual. And that was a really important piece. But what I'm so excited to teach is, even though you're moving through it, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to accept abusive behavior or a betrayal or the shattering of trust. That doesn't mean you don't heal. You owe it to yourself to heal, but you don't have to think about it. We're actually doing both of us a disservice. The person who's been betrayed and the betrayer, they're doing each other a grave disservice if there are no consequences from that action. The betrayer doesn't learn anything, and the betrayed only feels worse.
Sounds like there's a piece also just around a kind of a more sophisticated and discerning way to approach boundaries. So because it's not like a blanket yes or no, it's really like boundaries are contingent upon where that person is in their own growth and how they're going to engage with you.
Absolutely. And you know, when I was doing the study, I remember reading all of these studies around forgiveness. And there was this one study I read, and it said, if you feel safe and valued and you forgive, you feel better. If you do not feel safe and valued and you forgive, you feel worse. And I'm a believer that forgiveness is for us, and it's in our best interest to do it anyway, for our own health and wellness and sanity. So I kicked it up a notch, and I changed it, and I wrote about it in Trust Again. And I said, what would happen if we changed forgive to reconcile? And it would sound like this. If you feel safe and valued and you reconcile, and this is with a family member, partner, friend, coworker, whatever. If you feel safe and valued and you reconcile, you feel better. If you do not feel safe and valued and you reconcile, you feel worse.
That's a great point. The resetting of the boundary with that person is the healthy response if they're not really going to be mature enough to treat you in a way that's honorable.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, this is something I'm going to share this, and everybody, you'll remember this forever. The way it works is when trust has been broken, when we're out of a relationship, we're so heartbroken, we're so upset. Here is the time where typically we think, okay, well, let me just find another relationship. And then all we do, this is the repeat betrayal, which is a clear sign of an unhealed betrayal. It is the opportune time to do the work, to heal physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, here's what I see so often. If we're so committed to this person, and then we start doing the work, what we do is we start sabotaging ourselves because we don't want to outgrow them. We like it up here, but we keep sabotaging ourselves because we don't want to outgrow them. But so then we get here and we say, well, why can't they do this? Well, because they're not ready. So what happens is, if we're so committed to this person and we do this, we get this. Where this person's like, what happened to you? And we think, oh, I'm not the least bit interested in you. So here are a few options. You do the work to get here, having no understanding of what this person's going to do on their own. They can do this. And then you meet up again here. Like, that's what I did with my husband. That was the deal breaker. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going to be the poster child for betrayal. I'm going to heal. And then on his own, he did this. And then we met up here. Now, that's one scenario. Or you do this and you just sort of go your own way. Or at the very least, you meet people here, whether it's friendships, partnerships, any relationship, because this is where you now live. Very different experience.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's important to decouple from that commitment so that you kind of create the space. Either the person grows and evolves or they don't, but you're independently just going to go and operate from that new level anyway.
And I'll tell you, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And one of the groups, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of fear, financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, that was a big one. They just did all they could to turn the other cheek, put it behind them. And I saw 2 things with this group. The first was a further deterioration of the relationship. And the second thing was this group was the most physically ill. Your broken heart can't handle that, but I get it. So many people are so afraid of that complete death and destruction of the old, but that's how you birth the new. And I use this analogy, and it really explains betrayal and transformation. And it's this analogy of a house. And if you can imagine, here's the difference between resilience and transformation. So let's say a house needs, resilience is restoring, bringing back, and you need that for your everyday. Trauma and transformation, whole different thing. So let's say you have a house and the house needs a new boiler. You get a boiler. That would be resilience. Let's say it needs a new roof. You get a roof. That would be resilience. You're restoring it. Here's trauma and transformation. A tornado comes by and levels the house. A new boiler is not going to fix it, and a new roof's not going to fix it. And in fact, both won't fix it. But here's the thing. You have every right to look at the lot where your house once stood and say, this is the most horrible, awful, terrible thing that's ever happened. And you'd be right. And you can call over all your friends and say, isn't this the worst thing you've ever seen? And they'd all agree. And you have every right to mourn the loss of your house until your last breath. However, should you choose to rebuild the house, you don't have to, but if you choose to, why would you build the same one? There's nothing there, right? Why not give it everything the old house didn't have? Why not make it better and more beautiful? That's the opportunity. Betrayal is the catalyst for transformation.
So in some ways, it sounds like part of it, like when you get into that stage 5 territory, you get kind of more, maybe even excited about the rebuild project of like the new possibilities. So it's less of just a reaction to the betrayal, more of like, oh, what do I want to create?
Exactly. And if I tell you how many businesses, relationships we've seen birthed in that stage 5, the PBT Institute, that was a stage 5 thing. These things don't show up before then because we're not ready to see them. But when there's that complete and total crash, that's where we have those ideas. And when you're in that stage 4 going to stage 5, that's when you're ready for a new relationship with the same person or someone new. That's when you're ready for a new level of health. That's when you're ready for that new business. These opportunities come along that you never had access to because it was like you were carrying this 500-pound boulder of pain and you put it down and now you see all that's available to you. So it's a really exciting time.
I feel called to ask you a little bit about how best to engage with somebody who's like in a stage 3 kind of process, because it's I think part of what a lot of people do is they're uncomfortable with that stage 3 in other people and then want to kind of cheerlead them or get them to bypass or jump into stage 5. But it seems like a lot of that is just ultimately going to not be that helpful and maybe even keep them stuck too.
Absolutely. And what happens is they're receiving so many benefits from staying there. And I know that sounds crazy. What kind of benefit would you get from staying stuck? But you are. And you have a lot to lose. Think about it. And I see this all the time with people who join, let's say, a support group. And then what happens is when you start to heal, you almost don't belong. And these have become your new people. So what do? You sabotage yourself so you don't outgrow them. So there are so many things we do to keep us stuck. And then once we start using anything to avoid, numb, distract, we stay there. And also in stage 3, that's when we can think we're healed, but we're hardened. Very big difference. Like that's the person who may say, well, I'm great as long as I don't see them. I mean, that's not healed. That's hardened. And it's a very different experience where if I can give you sort of not a timeline, but an emotion line, let's say you start with deep, profound sadness. Oh my gosh, how could you do this? And then it goes to anger. How could you do this? And then it kind of moves to like pity, like really? That's what you have to do? And then you get to compassion. And when you're in compassion, you're good. That's stage 5.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how the same concepts apply to areas that might not be big betrayals, but might be kind of little more, I think you call them micro betrayals.
Mm-hmm. When trust has been shattered, when we are hypervigilant. We don't feel safe. We aren't trusting again. And these micro betrayals, even something like a white lie, for someone else, they may not be a big deal. For someone who's been betrayed or whose trust has been shattered, it's terrifying because there's no sense of safety, because their go-to response may be, oh my gosh, if they could lie about that, what else can they lie about? So even those micro betrayals, those little, when someone shows, when they don't have that whatever it takes attitude to rebuild, that's when it becomes very scary. And that's when we feel shaky and uncertain. And with the shattering of trust, all the rules change. And here's an opportunity to reset boundaries. And yes, they can be really strict at first, but it's because you need to get your sea legs strong again. You need to feel like you're standing on solid ground. Trust is so foundational. So something as small as a white lie can just absolutely create a sense of fear and anxiety in us when we're healing.
So you're moving from the stage 3 into stage 4. And so maybe it's really healthy to say, you know what, I'm not going to even be friends with anybody who will lie about anything while you're in that phase, just because you're just like, I don't want to bring that into my space.
And it's a very personal process, not a lonely process, a very personal process. You know, when you think of the symbol of transformation, right? The caterpillar turning into a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't just stick on a pair of wings and become a butterfly. The caterpillar on some random day, right, is just done. And look at the symbolism here. Puts itself into this cocoon, hangs itself from a branch in order to die to the life it's known, is willing to be deconstructed, emulsified, unrecognizable from anything it once was. Only because it went through that does it get to be the butterfly. And that's that change. But if we're so busy hanging on to the old rules, the old boundaries, we don't put ourselves in that cocoon, and we don't really experience the transformation that happens. And that's exactly when, and that's why I said, when we go from stage 3 to stage 4, very common where our friendships change, because no one else changed. It's us. Which is, you know, when we realize it's us, then it's like, okay, let me do this on my own here. And I see them clearly for who they are.
And imagine there's some predisposition towards being attracted to somebody who may do that, I would guess, from childhood. And so how do you work with the kind of the layer of the kind of the overt, like the big betrayal, somebody cheated on in a marriage, but then also be working with what are the predispositions that come from the family that might be underneath that?
You know, when it comes from way back, this is when we learn about relationships. This is when we learn who we are. So now think about it. If we're a child, and let's say we grew up with narcissistic parents, for example, we're used to being, to feeling a certain way and expecting only a certain amount because we've been taught we're less than, undeserving, unworthy, unlovable, whatever it is. So think about it. Then we get older and we move into relationships, not because they're good, because they're familiar. It's like, okay, I know this. I know how to move within this. I understand it. And it suits how we currently feel. And that's why it's ideal. The intention is to do this work so you don't keep living here forever, because then this will only be what you attract. You really need to take that time and do the work to get here, because that's when life changes.
Do you find that there's a sort of a rhythm of working through the stages? It's sort of more natural, or does it really just depend on somebody's particular makeup?
Yeah. You know what I find, the biggest word that's needed when it comes to how quickly you'll move through the stages is willingness. And even when I was doing this study, I assumed, you're not supposed to assume anything as a researcher. I was new at this, but I assumed the people who were the hardest hit would grow the least because they had the most to overcome. And that had nothing to do with it, nothing at all. It was a willingness just to move through it with, and not really know what's going to show up, but they just knew it had to be better than what they were experiencing. But as far as the stages, that was the approach for me as well. I just said, I'm putting my head down here and I'm not picking it up until I'm out the other side. But I do remember saying to myself, if I can heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. So I remember saying that. But really, the way it works with the stages You don't skip a stage. The order doesn't change, but it isn't really pretty and linear like that. No, it's like this. You sort of, you're moving forward, moving back, moving forward, but you keep moving forward. And you kind of outgrow one stage as you move into the next one.
At what point does it become valuable for people to think about, like, what's the gift or the blessing in having gone through something terrible? Because it often strikes me, sometimes we'll kind of try to layer that on too early or cheerlead somebody into that versus like it's a natural evolution.
It has to come from within. It really does. I mean, if it's forced, it's not natural. And the way I see it, if I were to give sort of another analogy, what happens is it's almost like, imagine you're running. You're just running in a direction. You've been running in that direction for years. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, you know what? This is not the right direction. So think about what happens. You slow down, you pivot, and you start to run in a direction now that serves you so much better. There is an intense amount of confusion after betrayal because everything you've known is no longer, and that road isn't the right road anymore. So there's this real deep confusion as you stop and pivot and start running in that other direction. And it's only when you're in that direction do you discover what it is that you are uniquely called to do. And the only way I can explain it is it's really when you turn that corner and just keep moving without really knowing what shows up and allowing for those downloads and allowing for those insights, you'll see it. You'll see it. We see it all the time.
It sounds like one of the common threads is really this sort of reinvention of yourself, that somehow the betrayal kind of had a like wrecking ball of an old pattern, and that it kind of allows you to construct a new house, if you will. And so are there other things that are common threads about like what tends to emerge from people in the stage 5?
Yeah, I've seen new levels of health, new businesses, new relationships with the person who hurt them, with someone new. You're a different person when you've healed from betrayal because you've rebuilt the self. You've healed from that sense of rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. You show up differently. You resonate. You're attracting a very different type of person because you're putting out a very different type of energy. It's all those things that you didn't have access to. Now you do. It's like you're in it, you were here, at this certain level of energy and playing in a certain sandbox, and you're just not playing there anymore. And now imagine if you're up here, you see things from such a different vantage point. It's a game changer, and it's beautiful to watch. And what's so exciting is the ripple effect, because not only is it the person who's healed, but I see it all the time. Like I have 4 kids, and the ripple effect on how it's impacted them. And I see this all the time with parents, or, they see it with their children. It's such a beautiful opportunity to teach your kids resilience skills, and watch them transform as well.
Beautiful. Well, it's super inspiring to talk to you about this arc and the potential really for so many people to transform this rather than being stuck for decades. And so let's talk about an opportunity to do that. And first of all, we just want to say we're really blessed that Debbie's agreed to do a program with us. It's really distilling the essence of all this research and life work into a 7-module program that can really lay the foundations for you taking this journey from betrayal to breakthrough. The name of the program is called Beyond Betrayal: 5 Stages of Healing to Help You Trust and Love Again. And I love the specificity of this program because it's really about a very specific kind of wounding or challenge that people very commonly gone through, and then how to kind of create a pathway out of that. So it really creates a sort of specificity versus just transform your life. It's like, no, it's like there's a very specific way of transforming something that has really been a deep challenge for you. So the program is at the URL healingfrombetrayal.com, healingfrombetrayal.com. It's a 7-week program. There's no prerequisites. And so it's really just if you recognize the potential value for you in taking this journey, that there's some part of you that hasn't completed that journey, that hasn't completed a cycle, that there's more to come for you if you really embark on a deeper level of this journey, then you're warmly welcome to join. So Debbie, I'd love for you to share a little bit about from your perspective, why take this journey? And then I'll read out the module titles. You give us a little sneak preview of what's coming.
Sure. Well, you've been through the worst of it already. You owe it to yourself to do something really good with something really painful. And I didn't do anything that anybody else couldn't do. I just said, there's got to be something better than this feeling. And I know the pain. I know how painful it is. And I also know the feeling of moving through the stages and experiencing a version of yourself that never would have shown up had that not happened. And you deserve that. You deserve to meet that version of you who's been patiently waiting.
Great. Module 1, Understanding Betrayal and Shattered Trust, an overview.
That's all about what betrayal is, what it does, how I'm going to show, and I'm going to teach how betrayal shows up in your health, in your work, in your relationships. It affects everything. I'm also going to be talking about your beliefs and how the shattering of trust creates a set of beliefs. And I'm also going to be talking about how we're going to be doing a very eye-opening activity where you're going to see where trust was originally shattered, and it may not be where you think.
Module 2, 3 groundbreaking discoveries that change what we know about betrayal.
So we're going to be going more deeply into the 3 discoveries. And what I'm also going to be doing is walking everybody through the post-betrayal syndrome quiz and the healed or hardened quiz. So you'll know exactly what stage you're in. And from there, you'll know why you're in that stage and what you can do about it.
Module 3, Stage 1, prioritizing physical and mental over emotional and spiritual needs.
Here's where I'm going to run you through the 4 questions, really powerful 4 questions to see if you're numbing, avoiding, distracting, and why. We're going to be talking about the subconscious beliefs that are keeping you sick, sad, and stuck. And I'm going to be doing an activity with you. If affirmations haven't worked for you in the past, this activity will.
Module 4, Stage 2, breakdown of the body, mind, and worldview.
I'm going to be running you through a system assessment so you can see exactly what the shattering of trust and betrayal, even if it happened decades ago, has left you with. And we're also going to be talking about the right type of support, because the wrong type of support does more harm than good and can actually prevent the healing. And here's the thing too: if the red engine light in your car were to show up, you wouldn't put a sticker on it and ignore it. It's trying to tell you something. And so what I'm going to be doing in this module is sharing with you how we often, because we can't imagine these symptoms are showing up as a result of an unhealed betrayal, we mask the symptoms and they get louder and louder until we truly have to do something about them.
Module 5, Stage 3, survival instincts emerge.
Yeah. Here's where I'm gonna talk about everything that happens in that space of survival. What are the benefits for staying stuck? We're going to write them out, and you're going to see, oh my gosh, am I really doing that? And that's okay. I'm going to be talking about the different emotions that we experience and express in stage 3. And I'll be talking about the 3 groups who did not heal. So this way you can know if you're doing those things to find a way not to do them, because it will prevent your healing. I saw it in the study.
And Module 6, Stage 4, finding and adjusting to a new normal.
Here's where I'm going to teach you something so powerful, where we face it, feel it, heal it. We're going to be talking about the grieving process, how it's so crucial to help us in our healing. We're going to learn why spirituality plays an important role in our healing, and in what way we can use it to help us. We're going to do a really transformative activity where we take what had become our life story and turn it into a pivotal chapter of our next story. And it's one of the biggest needle movers taking us into the next stage.
Fascinating. And finally, Module 7, Stage 5, healing, rebirth, and a new worldview.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to take everyone through a much loved activity, and it's a visioning activity where you will see who you are at your physical, mental, and emotional best, at your personal and professional best. And the beauty of that is then we'll reverse engineer. And for that to be the version that we're moving towards, that's your bullseye. And then we'll strategically build a plan now that we know exactly what we're shooting for, how to get there. And here's where we talk about a self-care routine and just all the different aspects that need attention. How do we create a plan for you to just keep the healing moving? And what are you now ready for that the version of you, even in stage 4, wasn't ready for? We'll be taking that all on in that last module.
Well, I love how just thorough and sequenced and clearly based on really solid research this is, and really focusing people on ultimately the transformational opportunity and the gift and the hardship it had to go through. So really great stuff. So again, the whole program is laid out in detail at healingfrombetrayal.com. And not only do you get the 7 live modules with Debbie, which are 90 minutes each, you can ask all your questions, you can engage in the practices. You're also going to get recordings, both video and audio, so you can go back to anything you missed or want to practice again. You're going to get word-for-word transcripts, as well as weekly exercises and practice at home, and a Facebook learning community to really enhance and support and deepen your journey. On the page, you'll also see a number of bonuses that are there really to enhance your journey as well. There's 30 daily cards from the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute, daily affirmation cards to really take you on this journey and really affirm the different steps. There's also a really robust bonus. It's a complimentary ticket to the next Trust Again intensive. That's actually a 5-day online intensive in June with Debbie. Debbie, you want to share a little bit about that intensive?
I think I've done it about 6 times. We have people who do it 5, 6 times. They love it. They get so much out of it. It's like if you've ever read a book and then you change and you read the book again, you're different and you get a different set of experiences from it. It's transformative. Everybody is doing deep healing work together. It's a lot of fun.
Another one, Why We Get Blindsided, The Nature of Trust. It's a PDF excerpt from the book Trust Again that Debbie's written. And we have one special bonus, which is available only until midnight tonight. And that's our way to encourage you to make a decision now while you have the most information and really the biggest opportunity to move forward when you hear what she's had to share and you can really sense the potential value in your life to make these deep transformations happen in a good way. If you sign up by midnight, you'll get 5 curated sessions from our Empaths and Sensitives and Intuitive Summit. That includes a session with Debbie, as well as Deborah Wayne, Mark Tanaka, Mario Martinez. Really great stuff to help enhance your journey of self-awareness and healing. So we've kept the investment really accessible for this program. It's just 3 payments of $109, or you save 10% when you pay in full with 1 payment of $297. Course is going to start on April 13th and run Wednesdays at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. But even if you can't make those live times, you can still get the full value with the community and recordings and the transcripts and just really returning to the practices as well. So I encourage you to read some of the testimonials on the page from great people like Shift faculty member Sue Mortar and teachers like Mary Morrissey, really endorsing the power and the precision of this method to help you transform some of the areas of greatest breakdown of trust. And betrayal is really one of the most difficult things to transform. So Debbie has a proven system for how you do so. So I encourage you to go to the page again at healingfrombetrayal.com and give it a read, tune in, and if you get a nudge to move forward, then you've got those 5 extra bonuses from the Empaths, Sensitives, and Intuitive Summit when you sign up by midnight tonight. So Debbie, it's been a really illuminating, great hour, so much good information, and thank you for your willingness to go into these deeper, darker corners of our psyche and help us grow and transform from some of the hardest things that we've had to go through and really come up with such a powerful system to help people do so.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's one of those things that I know in the beginning, you feel you can't even get out of bed. And then you wonder, how can you ever heal from this? I promise you can. And there's a roadmap to do it. So if you're experiencing the symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, and even if you've been experiencing them for decades, it doesn't have to keep going. Not on my watch. So join us and let me teach you the 5 stages so you can move through them and really enjoy the version of yourself that's waiting.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for that empowering perspective and all the wisdom you've shared in this hour. And thank you all for joining. And if you would like to go further, you're warmly welcome to do so. And you can do so at healingfrombetrayal.com. And you get those 5 curated sessions when you sign up by midnight tonight. So thank you, Debbie. And thank you all. Many blessings.
Thank you so much.